Okay, friends, I'm actually looking forward to this tutorial. So in chapter 3 of this course, we saw how we can make functions, right? And so far in this chapter, chapter 4, we've been working with arrays. So hopefully, if you followed along, you're a bit more comfortable now with both functions and arrays. The whole point of functions is to write code that is reusable, code that we can use over and over again. And one thing we've been doing now quite a bit in this chapter so far is we've been creating an array and then logging out all of the elements of that array to the console. So what I'd like us to do is create a function that basically logs out all of the elements of an array. And the code will be reusable, so we could pass in our VOT heroes array, we could pass in our Canadian cities, Australian cities, American cities, whatever the case may be. So I'd like you to try to do that yourself. Um, Otherwise, you can code along. So I think for this one, we'll just do a function declaration. So I'm going to say function using the function keyword, and I'm going to call this array, or sorry, this function print array. Okay, print array. We have our parentheses and we have our curly braces. So we know the syntax of a function. We know that we have the function keyword if we're doing a function declaration, and then we give our function a name. Now, this function, as far as I'm aware, I believe it's going to be our first function in this course that actually takes in a array as an argument, and that's fine. What we can do is just simply call the argument to be passed in array. So this is what we're going to call our parameter. And remember, array, what I've typed out here, that's just a placeholder. That is just so we can get reference to it or refer to it inside of our code block here. So when we get our array passed in from our function, what do we want to do? Well, what we want to do is we want to iterate or cycle over all of the elements of the array. So the array is of the VOT heroes. The Boys is a great TV series on Amazon Prime. I think it's really funny. But VOT heroes at index 0 will be Homelander, index 1 will be Queen Maeve, index 2 will be the Deep, I've written it out here for you. Index 3 will be Starlight, and index 4 will be Black Noir. That actually rhymed, I wasn't planning that. I feel like Claudia Winkleman from BBC, being witty on my feet. Okay, we're going to have our for loop. And now what do we want to do? Well, we want to define a for loop that just iterates over each element of an array. Well, first of all, we know by now that because JavaScript is a zero-based language, arrays in JavaScript that start at index 0. So we can define our counter variable I to start at 0. So we'll say let I be equal to 0. And how many times do we want to run the loop? Well, we want to run while I is less than the array length, right? We want to go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, that was 4, yeah. So what we can do is we can say we want to run while I is less than 4, while I is less than 5, but instead of saying I is less than 5, we want to make it dynamic. So we'll just run while I is less than the array name, the array dot length, okay? And then after each loop iteration, we want to increment our counter variable I, so I plus plus. Then what we'll do is we will just have our curly braces for the for loop, and all we want to do is just console.log out the array at index of I, okay? So any array you pass into this print array function, whether it is Canadian cities or VOT heroes or whatever the case may be, okay? Let me just quickly do what do you say, Toronto, Montreal, I'll just do one more, and then Calgary, okay? So any array you pass in, whether it's cities or VOT heroes, inside of the code now, we're just making a reference to whatever was passed in by referring to array, okay? So for any array, we're going to start counting while we're going to start our counter variable at I is equal to 0, okay? We're going to run while I is less than the array.length, and after each loop iteration, you just want to increase I. And all we're doing each time we run through the loop is just console.logging whatever array was passed in at index of I, which the first time the loop runs will be index 0. So say hypothetically I pass in the VOT heroes array, right? And let's actually do that. Why hypothetical? Let's do it. To call or invoke the function, we know we want to type out the name of the function. So print array, and what we want to do, we want to pass in our VOT heroes. So here what we've done now is we've actually called or invoked the function called print array. Okay, we've done that. And we've passed in the VOT heroes array. All right, we've passed in the VOT heroes array. So when VOT heroes are passed in to the function, array is just a reference now to whatever's passed in, so our VOT heroes. So we say for let I be equal to 0, while I is less than the array.length, while I is less than 5, we're going to enter the loop. So we're just logging out console.log array at index I, in which case it's 0, so that will just be Homelander. Then we come up here, because we've completed our first loop, we increment I to be 1, so now we're just logging out Queen Maeve, the Deep, Starlight, and Black Noir. And remember, when we print out Black Noir to the console at index 4, we've now logged out all of the heroes. What happens then is we come up and we increment I. Now I is a value of 5. And is 5 less than 5? No, it's not. That evaluates to false. Therefore, we exit the loop and the function stops running. Okay? So if I just show you now the console, we get, well, I've logged them out here. So let's just comment those out and let's do that again. Our heroes logged out to the console. To prove that this function is working, what I could do as well is I could actually just comment this out and then pass in the cities array to our function. So what I could do is, once again, I could just say print array, call or invoke that function, and I'll just pass in cities. Okay? So remember, we're now passing in the Canadian cities, Toronto, Montreal, Calgary. So that data is passed into our function print array. And then once again, we enter the for loop. So we're saying, okay, well, let I be equal to 0 and run the loop while I is less than the array length. So this is a length of 3. So is 0 less than 3? Yes, it is. So we log out cities at index 0, which would be Toronto. Then we use the increment operator ++ to increment I. I is a value of 1. So we log out Montreal. Then we log out Calgary at index 2. After we log out Calgary, we increment I. That now is a value of 3. 3 is not less than 3 because they're equal. That evaluates to false. Therefore, we exit the loop and the function stops running. And if I just save this now, we should see Toronto, Montreal, and Calgary. And we do. And the great thing about the code we've written is it is dynamic. So if I was to add another city to the array, let's do Vancouver. Now the array has a length of 4. And the great thing is we don't have to change any of our code here. We didn't hard code this. It is dynamically, the array length will update, okay, automatically. So now if I save and refresh, we have dynamic code. Awesome. Okay, great. I hope you enjoyed that tutorial. It was kind of nice to bring together functions and arrays and for loops, of course, another great topic in JavaScript. So I'll see you in the next tutorial.